good. Will you join us in Pledge of Allegiance as we start?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for being here. We had a meeting earlier on, and it sort of kind of kept on going, so we're running a little bit late. I apologize for that. Apparently, we're doing this at this point. Okay. It was nice to see Tom Kennett arrive. He has a proposal for us that has to do with a Heritage Resource Overlay District and the Brandywine Conservancy proposal. Would you like to do that now?
That would be perfect, thank you.
Just so you're all aware, Tom Kennett is our landscape architect. And he's presenting a proposal for our Land Conservancy Advisory Committee.
Thank you.
So he's going to explain the proposal.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
This over if you want.
Okay, sorry. This is actually my first Board of Supervisors meeting of the year. I think at the initial meeting, I had some kind of conflict, so thanks for inviting me. Actually, I'm delighted to be selected as the Kennett Township landscape architect, but actually I have two hats. I have both degrees and certifications as a landscape architect and as a planner. So in the past few months, I've been invited to join the Planning Commission meeting. I think it was the January meeting, the EAC meeting, to talk about plant list amendments in February, and then also the Land Conservation Advisory Committee. And in each case, it enabled me to go through the Kennett Township ordinances and to take a look at what we already have. And I was impressed with all the mapping that the Land Conservation Advisory Committee had previously prepared and wanted to update. And so in a proposal that I prepared dated March 24th, what I first did was to enumerate the drawings that Margot Taylor had sent me just to kind of get to first base. Many of those plans were dated 2010, and they included titles like open lands, protected lands, designated open lands, conservation valuation map, and landscape corridors. At the meeting on March 13th upstairs, the entire group convened, and we looked at other maps from 2005 and 2010, including designated and open space map and summary of high-value resource areas. Well, cumulatively, what the LCAC wants to do is to update and refresh all the maps and to just basically create a final composite map that they would call Conservation Priorities Map. And it would look at the properties that already have easements. It would look at developed lands. It would look at undeveloped lands. And it would prioritize those resources and basically say for properties that are not yet under easement or otherwise protected, what resources might be at risk, what resources might be useful to consider for future easements, designated open space, or what have you. So having digested those maps, I, at the meeting and afterward, I basically said, let me just kind of first zoom out a little bit and ask the question, in what context do these resources sit? And so in the proposal, I mentioned the aspect of Kennett Township in the context of the Red Clay Creek and White Clay Creek valleys, the Kennett Pike Corridor and Scenic Byway, our whole kind of topographic, physiographic regime, the kind of zone of plant hardiness that would be in and around Kennett, called Zone 7A, and then just the whole cultural, historic landscape in and around Kennett Township. And having done that, I cited in the proposal no fewer than 7 sections of the state planning code that enables municipalities in Pennsylvania, and in particular in this proposal, these protection opportunities. So if you ask yourself the question, when municipalities started to create floodplain zoning, what was the enabling legislation? Well, it came from the Municipalities Planning Code, Article 6 on zoning, and Section 603 through 605 that have to do with classifications. Many municipalities in Chester County also have steep slope conservation districts. Some municipalities have airport noise zones, like West Goshen around the Brandywine Airport, and I'm not sure what's around the Tuff-Kenneman Airport. But there are a number of attributes that enable municipalities to have these overlay districts. And all things considered, what I saw and was impressed with these conservation priority maps was the ability to weave together and to knit together many of the separate sections of the Kennett Township ordinances that perhaps could be strengthened and synthesized into what is described, just first step, toe in the water, Heritage Resource Overlay District. And a lot of those terms are terms of art that come right out of the statute. And so what Margot Taylor, as the chair of LCAC, asked me to do was to write a proposal, because I'm the new kid on the block, and this initiative to take the conservation priorities map that the Brandywine Conservancy would refresh. They did it 2005 through 2010 using their GIS, Geographical Information Systems, and they would update those maps. And then the question is, well, what would we do with them? And so we thought, well, in this room, we would convene at least 2 sort of think tank meetings, public discussions to determine if we could agree on the priorities, whether they be sort of first priorities or these most vulnerable and most sensitive resources and second priorities. And if we can get to that point and we tell the Conservancy, okay, now we're going to include these resources, we could eventually create as a hybrid of all the mapping, this so-called Heritage Resource Overlay District. It could be the mirror image of the Conservation Priorities Map. But nonetheless, in talking to LCAC on March 13th, we kind of talked about a process. I then outlined that process in terms of meetings and drafts of the ordinances and interface with the Planning Commission and the EAC and the supervisors. And essentially what the proposal says, task 1, meet with the supervisors to present this proposal. And then it says if, like big if. If the supervisors authorize the work, then continue to task 2 through 14. If the supervisors don't authorize the work, then I won't have anything to do on it. Although the Conservancy will still update the maps. The real important part is to say, how can we look at existing ordinance provisions and strengthen them, and then create this sort of hybrid Heritage Resource Overlay District that essentially will help ensure the protection of these resources in the long term. And so that's pretty much what's outlined in the proposal. And essentially, I think what LCAC wanted me to do was to kind of quarterback the process so that, given my familiarity with the state planning code, this mapping, and so forth, to kind of organize everything so that at a certain point in time, and I'm trying to remember timing, just basically says whatever schedule, but let's just say by the end of this year, beginning of next year, be in a position that there could be a public hearing to consider the adoption of these items. So that's pretty much it in a thumbnail. And I know that Margaret couldn't make it tonight, and other members, certain other members of LCAC sent me emails saying that they couldn't. And the purpose of tonight's meeting is not to determine what the conservation priorities are, not to determine what weight would be placed on those, because that would be forthcoming discussion and discussions through the public process. But moreover, just to kind of like an overall program design or marching orders or an overall sequence of work that LCAC could pursue later this year. They're going to actually meet tomorrow night as one of their regular monthly meetings. I think they then, awaiting the supervisors' consideration, invited me to come back with them on May 22nd to further kind of discuss and drill down into this concept. So, any questions or anything I could expand on?
The proposal cost is approximately, well, it's between $14,000 to $18,000 for what?
Yeah, on the last page, page 6 of the proposal, it just basically says that cost could range from $15,000 to $18,000 depending on the length of the 5 meetings that are enumerated. And, you know, if it's less than $15,000, then it's less than $15,000. What we don't know is what the new maps are going to reveal. I suspect there's going to be a normative amount of time, like 3 hours for the 2 public stakeholder meetings. You know, there could be 2.5 hours, there could be 5 hours. You know, we'll wait and see how it plays out. So.
Yes.
Does your proposal include working with the neighboring communities and what they intend to do and coordinating with their efforts?
Well,
places like New Garden have done a lot of work on trails, open space, and that type of thing.
It's a good question, and I suspect that these public workshop meetings that LCAC will invite as many people and stakeholders both in and around the township. We didn't actually identify any going to their meetings, but you know, it could be that they could come to our meetings. We could invite them. So.
You did a study a number of years ago on the Ways Lane area.
Yes.
And it was pretty comprehensive at that time.
He might be familiar with it.
Do you? Yeah, he did.
He did it.
He did it. Does that include an update of that proposal that you made a number of years ago, which is probably 8 or 9 years ago anyway?
No, this is a different work program.
So the output would be, I mean, I'm looking at a lot of the Brandywine Conservancy maps. It would be, here's one that says weighted cultural, historic, scenic resources.
Yeah. It
would be sort of updating some of this, but drilling down to a finer level.
Yeah, it's my understanding that, and maybe Lisa could correct me if I'm wrong, but it's my understanding that Margot also contacted the Brandywine Conservancy to get their cost estimate for the GIS mapping.
I have that to present next.
Okay, yeah, I hadn't seen it, nor do I need to.
Okay.
Well, while we're on that, the Brandywine Conservancy is saying that it will be about 6 hours to complete for the mapping. And so the LCAC is requesting about $2,500 for the mapping total.
Yeah, the work that I have outlined ends with ordinance amendments that do two things. They create a new chapter in the Kennett Township zoning ordinance, and at the same time, they take existing kind of resource-related ordinances and tie them into this. I suspect we'll actually have to go back and make some minor amendments to the existing ordinance provisions, just to make sure everything fits hand in glove. Let me just go to that for 1 minute. I was trying to find the specific, I have all the maps that were presented, and I was just trying to find the specific sections. They're not actually in the proposal, that are in the existing zoning ordinance that would have to be reviewed and analyzed.
But they might entail
I don't understand.
things along the lines of,
Well, for example, when I went to the EAC meeting and they were talking about their work program for the year, I discovered by looking at the zoning ordinance and the subdivision land development ordinance that we already have statements of intent and purpose for both ordinances, like on the second page, that aren't totally consistent with one another, nor are they consistent with the state planning code recital on the purpose of such ordinances. So those kinds of provisions would be improved, strengthened, made to be consistent. And then any natural feature-related provision in the zoning ordinance or subdivision ordinance that could be strengthened as a result of what we're doing would be, and then would be cross-referenced, improved, and upgraded in this Heritage Resource Overlay District. You could think of it this way, that while the floodplain ordinance and the natural resource protection standards are advisory and may have some minor mitigation measures built into them, the interpretation I had by reading each of them very carefully is they're not quite there yet, and they do not quite clearly provide the outcome that might be most appropriate to protect those resources in the long run. So it's really, and I guess Lisa Moore mentioned this when I was being interviewed for the landscape architect position, where Lisa said, well, we do have a number of existing ordinance provisions that need to be strengthened. In the last couple months, I've sort of discovered them. I haven't had a meeting one-on-one with Lisa to say, here's where the 20 sections that I found that could be strengthened, but I did that in the process of writing the proposal.
Joe?
Yes. Hang on, Joe.
Yeah, I just had a question about the deliverable, as I understand it, is the Conservancy provides a mapping deliverable, which is the updated maps, and then you're providing updates to ordinances?
Well, I'm going to sort of coordinate the process of several meetings, orchestrate the work session. So let me just go to the proposal. So beside this meeting, we're going to have 3 prep meetings with LCAC to focus on the task at hand. Touring Kennett Township to visualize existing conditions. Assist is very important because all of these maps, plus the ones that LCAC have, over time have different titles that might have the same resources. And in the first page of the proposal, I listed them. So one of the tasks is assist with map titles and legends to be certain that each map is clear. Because right now it isn't, and it's not, those terms of art of the maps don't appear anywhere in any of the ordinances right now, by the way. Then prepare for and orchestrate 2 stakeholder workshops, review existing ordinances, and analyze content needs for the new overlay district. Then prepare a first draft, thereafter meet with the supervisors once, the planning commission once, EAC, all the while getting feedback. Then prepare a second full draft of the so-called proposed Heritage Resource Overlay District. Then assist the solicitor in the process of enactment. That would involve sending the document to the Chester County Planning Commission for Act 247 review, and then preparing for one public hearing, and then a public meeting. So it's all of those things. So in terms of deliverables, the deliverables include the process that's involved that I just outlined. What I just summarized is everything in the proposal. I did not mention anything. That's the whole series of tasks.
Joe? Welcome
Yeah.
back.
Thank you. Joe Duffy, LCAC. Just to be clear, your proposal then includes bringing it to approval or disapproval of
Correct.
the ordinance.
Yes.
Okay.
Of the what, did you say?
His scope includes bringing it all the way to the approval or disapproval of the ordinance.
Yes, right, okay.
Can I ask a question? What is the $2,500 for the mapping? You said for 6 hours it would take to do mapping?
That's for the Brandywine Conservancy.
Yeah, I didn't prepare that proposal. I haven't seen it. I don't know what.
I have that
they say.
proposal. That's from the Brandywine Conservancy to create the maps, which they said will take up to 6 hours to complete.
Most of the money goes to the Conservancy.
Correct. That's a separate proposal.
It's part of the overall budget, but not his part of the budget.
Just one other thing, is there any provision for any ground truthing of any of this mapping? You're identifying sensitive resources, wetland areas, and I'm not sure what these other cultural areas are, but is it simply going to be a desktop mapping adventure, and then there's no real going out to the site and looking at the extent of those resources and making sure that the mapping is correct?
Yeah, again, I haven't seen the Conservancy's proposal, so I wasn't sure how they made the existing maps and what their plan is to amend them or update them.
That's not his area of responsibility.
Yeah.
Joe, do you know that answer, being part of the LCAC? Did the Brandywine Conservancy explain that any further, how they would do the mapping?
I wasn't party to those meetings
Oh, okay.
on the map.
Okay. I would have to find that out, exactly what their process is.
Good. Are there any other questions to address to our expert? Yes, sir.
The Planning Commission is in the process of updating the comprehensive plan.
Yes.
How would that tie into this, or would there be some interaction?
Yeah, it's a good question. We did talk at the March 13th meeting about that, and what I need to do is obtain a copy of whatever the document is. So far, I've seen some parts of it, but when everything is ripe, we're going to come to the Planning Commission and say, taking the information that you've done on the comprehensive plan and all this other mapping and some of the field work, the task that involves the tour was more of a kind of a reality check on what's actually out there. So the task, bear with me, task number 3, was more of an opportunity where LCAC and I, and anyone else who wants to join us, would go out and actually drive through every road of the township with a particular emphasis on sites which may be at risk now because of whatever's being proposed, or sites that had been developed where some resource value was lost, or just an overall sort of order of magnitude affection for the viewshed, for the stream valley, for the condition that's out there, so that I won't be the driver, but I'll be feverishly taking notes to process everything I hear, so that when it comes time to coalesce all the information, I'm very clear on what is out there that's near and dear to their hearts, so that we can clearly describe the intent and purpose and outcome of these things. So,
And as you know, P12 is on the LCAC's co-chairman. So he's been interfacing
Yes.
between the planning commission and LCAC already.
Scott, what is he called?
P12.
P12, okay.
Yeah.
I love that. Okay. I've never heard that before.
Chris, I found an email here that says that it's from the Brandywine Conservancy, that they will go out and do an assessment of each resource and create a spreadsheet and then create the maps.
Okay. So just one last thing, I'm sorry, maybe you should go ahead.
I'll finish your thought.
I was just, so this overlay district is going to create bulk and area requirements and use requirements in this area that are going to overlay districts on private property that abut a view shed or a stream corridor?
It could do that, plus it could also prescribe certain mitigation measures where there is encroachment or some type of possible change. I mean, the simple proposition is to define some kind of setback at the edge of or from the edge of certain features. But if you have to run a road through something, then how are you going to mitigate? If you have to remove some vegetation, to what extent do you deal with the replacement of the vegetation? What are some of the creative mitigation measures that might be in play if the impact is severe on these resources, however it would be? I mean, most of the time you'd hope that the best case scenario would be avoidance of these features, but owing to the configuration of a property, the alignment of streams, the access to a site that might be permitted in the underlying zoning district, all these factors would have to come into play to say, do we have enough safeguards in the ordinance today to protect those, and if not, what would we add to it for other protection? So.
Two questions, one for Mr. Kennett and one for the supervisors. What is the time frame once you get to go, if you get to go, but I have to assume you get to go for this question, what's the time frame for completion, do you think, of your work?
Well, oftentimes I try not to get something ready for a December meeting. I think if we were poised to move fairly soon, we would try to complete it by November. If, however, we go to the stakeholder meetings and we go back to the drawing board, it might be January of next year.
Okay.
It just depends on how that works.
So then my question to the board would be, how will this impact anything you're currently considering? I don't know if you are, but it's in the budget to consider for easing this year if his proposal's not done yet. I'm not saying that you can't do anything if he's not done yet, but would you be taking that into consideration even if it's some interim reporting? I think this affects the value of lands that might be considered for easement.
Absolutely, that's
the whole purpose.
The whole thrust of it. So certainly it should be considered. I'm a little hard pressed to know how to answer the question, if there's enough detail to it, but certainly it would be considered.
Well, what him saying was going to be end of the year or next year, that could put a kibosh on all your potential plans. I don't see that happening.
No, it certainly wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
I mean, we keep on going, but to understand that with the new year, this year, there was new people that went on to LCAC. There was a concern to address the procedures that have happened in the past, and how are they going to continue into the future? How are we going to go forward in working on conservation easements and other sorts of those kinds of transactions? And the committee, the LCAC, decided that it really needed to look at the whole process that was being done, because the process in the past was probably more honored in its breach. There was no real clear, consistent way for the committee to be dealing with those activities. And so this was the first step in that whole process of, well, where are we? How are things working? How do we want them to work? To evaluate what the is. But that doesn't mean everything stops while you start looking at that. You keep on going as best you can.
That's why I was wondering if the scope of your work would include consulting any projects or any opportunities, I should say, that could come the township's way before you're done, to make sure that it is fitting within the ultimate goals and objectives.
Well, since I don't know what they are, it would be helpful if somebody identified them for me.
Well, I was thinking in consultation with the supervisors, they might get you privy to that information.
Yeah.
It's not my information.
I mean, I think we would take a look at the priority from what we know now. I think what Mr. Kennett would be doing would be helping us organize that and sort of saying, well, this area is maybe another area to concentrate on, in addition to updating and organizing sort of different individual sections of the codes to try to pull it together to help us move forward. So I think there's a couple things going on with that. But to me, it sounds like this would help us in the future. Instead of being a little bit more reactive, we could be a little bit more proactive.
Yeah, just one footnote. I've been working for 41 years in Chester County and doing the work similar to what I proposed. And in Charlestown Township, where I've literally been working for 41 years straight, to do what I am proposing here, if I made an analogy, it's all of that, plus it's grassroots initiatives where members of their equivalent, LCAC, EAC, Planning Commission, Board of Supervisors, staff, actually do outreach with property owners so that before, and I won't mention developer names, but before developer A approaches a homeowner, or excuse me, a property owner that has 100 acres, who, let's say there was a death in the family, there's some estate planning that's just being poised to happen, and before a property owner might be enticed to sell the property for what appears to be like maximum market value at the time, there are constant, and there have been in the 41 years I've worked in Charlestown, opportunities to communicate with those property owners. Now, I wouldn't be doing that during this work program, but if you wanted me to, I could. It's just that if this were something that you really wanted to pursue, Kevin Kuhn from the Charlestown Supervisors sort of single-handedly is the ombudsman who goes out to many different property owners in Charlestown and just has a cup of coffee and talks about the options and explores ways to get easements, to actually sell the land to the township, to do conservation design subdivision, and there's all kinds of processes, including grants that might be available from the county or the state to do trails or acquisition of land or whatever. In Charlestown, I also am the consultant to Roadwork Township, Chester County, where you have St. Peter's Village. They also have a very interesting process, and a lot of other municipalities that you probably know of that I don't. But it takes 1,000 rays of light to get to the end zone. But the real thing that struck me, and this is really the most important part, is that, and actually I started working in Kennett Township when I was at Weston in 1974 as a staff planner for Weston. I did a couple of assignments for Kennett Township. And I found that the resource base in southern Chester County, from basically Kennett Township to the Delaware line, is magical. It's the Piedmont physiographic province. You're blessed with the stream valleys. You're blessed with a particularly interesting landscape that was logged 150 years ago that has some interesting views because of the way that topography works. When I checked the 1935 Orno Arboretum zone hardiness map, and you actually see what plants grow here versus in Exton, you ask the question, why did Bartram, RP Nursery, Tulin Tingle, Star Roses, the mushroom industry, why did it happen here? It's a concept that I've been very intrigued with. It has to do with climate and soil and drainage. And when you zoom out and you look at Kennett Township from a regional standpoint, my feeling was, if you waited 5 years to do this, and maybe even 10 years to do it, maybe the opportunities to create these resource protection zones are lost. You've already done a good job, but I think you could do even a better job. That's what it's about.
So my only point was, hopefully, your work concurrent to their decisions will be in the same lockstep results, that's all.
I would think we would be using the same vocabulary. Yeah.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments for Mr. Kennett?
Just
Yeah.
one more, sorry. So this overlay district will likely have the result of limiting property owners' rights as they currently exist under the zoning ordinance. Is that true or false?
It could, or it could advance a whole series of new mitigation measures so that if the resource values that are going to show up on this composite map are of a certain type, and we ask ourselves the question, do the current ordinances adequately address those types of mitigation measures? I don't know. I mean, I didn't get out like a magnifying glass and look at all the maps that Margot showed me. I was just struck by their completeness. But what we'll need to do is actually take whatever map is going to come forward and first overlay the flood hazard boundaries, the FEMA and the flood hazard boundary, and then ask yourself the question, if you take every other attribute of the ordinance that requires something, setback, riparian buffer, wetland, lack of wetland encroachment, what is left and what does it mean, and to what extent do we need ordinance provisions to protect those other resources? And once we get there, I can answer your question. I don't know the answer yet until we actually look at the mapping.
And all that would be done in other public meetings along the way.
Yes. And what we'll probably do at the second stakeholder workshop is have enough homework done that we explain what we discovered and now what we think we're going to do about it, and do you have any other suggestions for us and so forth. Yeah.
Sounds like you covered it.
So at this point, we need to know if the supervisors are in favor of proceeding with this proposal along with the Brandywine Conservancy proposal.
The Brandywine Conservancy is the mapping
Is the
proposal.
mapping.
Do you need a motion?
I do.
And that's the motion down here?
No, that's all up here.
There's a motion up here?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd like to move that we accept Tom Kennett and the Brandywine Conservancy's proposals.
We're up to 18,000.
Well, it's about 20 total for
So
the,
14
but
to
I'll get
18, Tom?
it's 14 to 18 for Tom and 2,500 for the Conservancy.
Yes, thank you.
Second. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
I'm in favor as well. Thank you, John. Okay, that gets us through the presentation. We're down to the minutes. And thank you. I have one item correction. Take care. Travel safely. Meeting dates. The very end, were announced by the Stevens. I think it's probably were announced by Stevens. Take the out.
I didn't write these, by the way. So you know I wasn't here.
And I didn't see them before about that.
I don't have any. I missed that one.
Did you find some too?
No.
Okay. Move we approve as corrected.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
None opposed. Thank you. Okay, managers report.
So everybody bear with me, I have a lot to say.
Would you move the microphone closer,
Sure.
please?
You want to?
Yeah. Okay. I wanted to let you know that the supervisors did a tour of the Underground Railroad. I went with them as well. Representatives from the railroad took us around to several of the Underground Railroad sites, so it was very interesting. I wanted to give an update on Stevens Gardens property. I've talked about this for months now. Our fire marshal's getting upset already back there.
It started to smoke.
Yeah. A couple months ago, the supervisors gave us the authorization that if Stevens Gardens didn't clean up their property because it's at the point that it's a hazard and the fire companies won't enter the property, that the township will go in and clean up the property and lien it. So in the meantime, we've met with the property owners, and when we served them the letter that we would come in and clean up the property if they didn't have it cleaned up by a certain date, they were already starting to demolish the buildings and doing some cleanup. So we gave them until the date, which was April 1st. We met with them again a couple days prior. We recognized that they were making some progress, which they were making some. They removed some of the building. They were removing dumpsters of debris. The problem is at that time, which was last week, there's still many piles of debris out there. It's still very unsafe. They have old cars that have been burned sitting there. They have piles of wood that's now encroaching other properties that if it caught on fire is a huge concern. It's at the point that the fire companies will still not enter the property. I told them last week that our fire marshal and our building inspector and zoning officer would be out there tomorrow to inspect again and see if they have everything completed, and if they didn't, then we're going to begin to get quotes to clean up the property. So tomorrow our building inspector and fire marshal will go out there. I mean, our zoning officer and our building inspector. Our fire marshal went out there today and inspected, and he's not satisfied with what they've done because they still have piles of debris and it's not cleaned up out there.
So, is there an idea of how much of the work they've done, some percentage, if they've done?
I would say maybe 20.
20%.
What would you think? He's probably going to say 5.
I would say less than 20.
Okay.
Right. I was just trying to get an idea because it was half or
Well, that-
75% versus a small amount.
Yes.
Where's this property located?
It's on Route 52, near the intersection of Route 1 and Route 52. It's a Stevens Gardens.
Sorry, take one.
Yeah, so maybe it's less than 20%, but we were
I've only
trying.
seen that big dumpster in there once.
Yeah.
They claim they've dumped it 5 times. I don't know, but that I'm not sure. So we already have a report back from our fire marshal, and tomorrow, like I said, the building inspector and zoning officer will be going out there, and if it's not totally cleaned up, then we will get quotes next week and start cleaning the rest of the property up.
Could I tie in with that
Yes.
program? At least a year ago, we identified a number of eyesores in the township, and these were turned over to our zoning officer, who was going to contact those people and ask them to clean up. Maybe we don't have an update on that, but would you ask the zoning officer, maybe at the next Board of Supervisors meeting, to tell us what progress he's made with those identified properties?
Okay, I can do that. I know that we are working on quite a few properties currently that need to be cleaned up, and we've sent out enforcement letters. We have a list of old properties that still need to be cleaned up, and but we'll try to get a list together for that.
I wish there was another way on Stevens Gardens if they were doing all the work or sufficient amount of the work themselves. That would be a much better alternative.
It sure would.
Is there a possibility of fining them for not doing it by a specific amount of time instead of spending more money on removing it?
The problem is the job needs to be done. It's a very dangerous situation, and the longer it stays like that, the more dangerous it becomes. So finding them doesn't really solve the problem. The problem is to make it safe.
Our fire companies have publicly stated that if there's a fire, they will not enter that property.
Can I speak on
Wait, Chris, hold on, Chris was trying to ask a question a couple minutes ago.
I was just wondering if any kind of an environmental assessment has been done on the property so that we understand the risks associated with possibly going in there to do demo as a township and finding that there is a contamination issue.
We haven't done that yet because we needed to be able to get control of the site to do that. So that will have to be done prior to us demolishing it. And then that will have to come, if there is an issue, of course, that would stall the project. Jeff?
Yeah, just one question. You would propose to go in with township forces and clean up the property and then lien the property. I guess the question is directed to the lawyer. Is there a chance that you didn't give him every opportunity?
No, we gave them every opportunity.
Okay, so if you're satisfied with
There's still the possibility that if they do not allow township personnel to come onto their property, that we would then have to go get an administrative search warrant from the magisterial district judge in order to do that. But we would find a way to get in there using the authority that the code official has under the property maintenance code to demolish and to
My
clear the
concern
property.
is that they would bring an action later and the lien would be invalid.
Well, if the lien is properly filed and supported by the appropriate documentation of the cost, it's going to stay on there until they pay it off or the property is conveyed.
Thank you.
Did you have?
Go ahead, I'll wait.
Bill?
Yeah, I just wanted, from David, if you lien the property and they declare bankruptcy, does that void the value of the lien?
Should not.
Municipal liens have priority over unsecured debt, and again, if they're absolutely, you'd have to look at what their assets are, what their liabilities are, and let the bankruptcy court do its thing. But I can tell you that taxes and municipal liens do have priority over other claims, so there's a better chance that we would get paid on that.
They would not
But
be discharged.
there's no guarantee.
They would not be discharged.
I can't say that 100%.
Have they been paying taxes, or township taxes,
They do.
and county?
Didn't they declare bankruptcy a while back when we tried to take them to court?
They did.
Is that still in effect?
I don't think so.
Did you have a comment?
Yeah, how was it allowed to progress this far? And who allowed that?
It is being actively managed, but it's been, there are a lot of complicated steps as you've been hearing in the conversation here. And the concern is that when somebody appears to be making a good faith effort, it would be far better for many reasons to allow that person to complete that good faith effort.
Right.
And when that good faith effort fails for whatever reason, then we have to become more involved. And so there was always this kind of playing. And I'm not suggesting it was a game, but it was sort of like working a fish, it seemed. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right.
No, you're right.
You're
Yeah.
exactly right.
You can't just say, in our eyes, you're violating the law and send guys on there just to do it and get it done and make it go away. There's all kinds of legal processes you have to go through. You've got to give appropriate notice. You've got to follow statutory requirements. Again, you're dealing with property rights. And whether the structure, you needed a determination that the structure itself was an imminent danger to health or life of somebody who might be walking onto the property. just because it looks bad doesn't always mean that you're allowed to take action against the property owner. But in this case, after the procedures were followed, we did get an engineer to memorialize the fact that the structure was unsafe and unsound, and that gave us the impetus to give them a deadline to remove it. And literally as we were ready to go in there to remove it, they had already started removing it and were working on it, as you've heard. So, I know that since the beginning of this year, I've had that file open and I've been working on that, at the request of the board.
He's had his 3 strikes.
Pardon?
He's had his 3 strikes.
Right.
Has he had his 3 strikes? Proverbially, yes.
And we did find them in the past, for not cleaning up that property, but it didn't cause them to clean it up.
But you see, the balance on that, Joe, is that, as has come out in this discussion, is it's so easy to say, well, let's just go ahead and take care of it. Well, except that there might be an environmental problem, as Chris points out, and it might be unsafe to put a fireman or a workman in there. And so, but we still got to do an evaluation as to whether there's that problem. So that if we do take this active role and start doing that, that stops everything for a while. And if he's showing propensity to do the work, just sort of sluggishly, are we better to allow him to keep going and ultimately get it done, or to get into it and really put our teeth into it and get it done? Those are judgment calls that are complicated. And so that's what we've been trying to work with during this whole period of time.
You think he's ever going to have the money to pay, if you're putting a lien, if the township is putting out the money to do about cleaning it up, what makes you think you'll ever get your money back?
You sell the property and take it from the proceeds.
Good luck.
Well, let me say that the property maintenance code under which we would be operating provides that exact remedy as the way to collect a debt that's owed on what the township pays to do the work if they don't pay. It's our only legal option is to put the lien on and either wait until they pay it off or wait until the property is sold and you obtain nobody is going to allow the title to transfer without satisfying the lien first, because the lien will come up in a title search.
Right. It's too bad, because before they took over, there was a very good greenhouse there, Heritage Gardens, and for that.
There today, it was awful.
Yep.
Always been.
We'd rather not go down this route, but otherwise it'll just remain the way it was
Yes.
for the last couple of years since the explosion.
Right.
So,
I wanted to let you know that we'll be posting a draft of the rental ordinance online. It's been revised, and it's out. At one point, the Planning Commission was reviewing it. Now, they're not anymore. The supervisors have revised the ordinance. It'll be posted online. It'll be advertised to be voted on at our May meeting, so everybody can go online and look at it. And if you have comments, submit your comments to us. The Pines, or Fussell House, whatever everybody calls it something different. This is a house located at the intersection of McFarland Road and Old Baltimore Pike. It's a historic house. It's part of the Underground Railroad. The township has requested to get an estimate of how much it would cost to rehab that house, to determine if possibly the township would be willing to obtain the house to rehab it, because we've been told by the property owner that he plans to demolish it. So recently we finally got the property owner to agree to pull up all the old carpet so that we can get in there and get an estimate done of the house.
Lisa?
Yes.
Excuse me. Isn't there a nonprofit organization that might be as well interested in owning that home and make it part of their treasury for tours and other future uses? That would be
I've
fine.
heard of many organizations that are interested, but nothing has happened with any of them that I know of.
I would just think it might be more appropriate for some non-profit organization other than the township, because I don't know how we'd ever get our money out of it.
Well, originally, we were told that the property owner would be willing to give the house to anybody that's willing to rehab it.
That's what I understand.
I recently had a meeting with the property owner, and he says now that he would like market value for it. So, I'm not sure what the outcome will be. And, if there's, I know that the owner has talked to some nonprofit groups. Didn't you talk to a couple people that they claim they're interested, but then nobody has done anything with it?
So then there's no onus on Mr. Silver, I assume he's the owner,
Right.
From the development approvals to cause him to be more active in that?
Well, I've been talking to our attorney about that because,
I would think it would be part of that agreement of, contingent upon at least keeping the structure sound.
well, the way that we read it was that the conditional use approval was based on keeping that house sound and rehabbing it for an office. So the way we understand it is if he wanted to apply for a demolition permit, he couldn't just simply demolish the house after you go through the whole process of historic demolition. He would have to go back and reapply for a conditional use application amendment, right?
Yeah, if the, and I have not completed my review of this, but if a condition of conditional use approval was that the house remains and, gets rehabbed or let's say doesn't get demolished, in order for him to demolish it, he would have to go back to the Board of Supervisors and ask the board to undo the condition that says thou shalt not demolish the house in order to demolish it. Because again, that was a condition that was not appealed, that was a condition of conditional use approval for, to use the property as he wanted to use it. So for now, I think the township has a strong legal and equitable argument that the house cannot be demolished without going through that process. I still need to review the exact language of the conditional use decision to see if it was merely discussed as part of the hearing or whether it was a specific condition to approval of the conditional use.
So he appears willing to let it deteriorate.
In addition, once you went through that whole process, you still have to come back and make an application for demolishing.
There is...
Which goes to
Yes.
the planning commission, to the supervisors, and that whole thing has its own trail that it has to follow.
Correct, and there are ways to at least delay demolition based on the historic nature of a structure sought to be demolished. There are other ordinance issues that kick in there. So, but the ultimate, when you get right down to it, after all that stuff is done, can he legally demolish it depends on whether it was a condition of approval.
Joe, I cut you off.
Oh, I was just, so then he may have the option, or it appears at this point to be just letting it deteriorate to its own.
As I say, after all that's done, and if it's not a condition of conditional use approval, even if a place is structured on the National Register of Historic Places,
Right.
that does not prevent its demolition. It doesn't, a property owner can do with his property what he wants. It behooves the rest of the community to come in and do whatever it takes to save it if it's that valuable.
Right. But ultimately, if it deteriorates to the point where it's unsafe, demolition seems imminent.
Well, again, that would be something the township would have to determine as far as enforcing the property maintenance code for, similar to Stevens Gardens. If they determine that structure was unsafe, they want to enforce the property maintenance code, they can go ahead and do that.
David Shepard from the Historical Commission. I would second what Scudder has said, because the supervisors have the right to deny demolition of a Class 2 structure, and that was classified as a Class 2 structure in our last historic survey. So I'm no attorney, but it appears to me that that's another way to stop the demolition of the building.
He has a long journey to go before he gets anywhere near his promised land.
And it doesn't sound like he's banging down the door and clamoring to demolish today, you know?
Excuse me, I was here when he first presented that, and basically my recollection is that he wanted to go through and get the permission to do it, but then he wanted to hold back until other alternatives could be brought forward. But that put everything in his control, obviously, which was a smart plan from his standpoint. But
Hard to sell.
I personally think he'd have a much harder time with this one than Longwood Gardens had with those bungalows. Because there is direct historic value, and it's perfectly right on Baltimore Pike for tourists to be a part of, and if it's properly maintained, enjoy.
Right, but in the meanwhile, he can let it go through benign neglect.
That's against our ordinance, though.
That's right, it's against the ordinance.
Yeah, that's
We
right.
have the power to intervene.
We have to be able to get in and take a look.
There's only certain things we can do per the property maintenance code.
I think that
Make sure he
this could be handled in a very happy way if we can get some community involvement, and get this thing taken care of on the value of it as being part of the history of this township.
That'd be the best outcome.
Absolutely.
Yes, sir.
Yes, Richard Gotch, Mr. Kenny Press. New Garden Township, as well as the town of Hockessin, each have taken historical buildings and actually physically moved them to other locations within the township for other purposes. Is that a feasibility? Is that feasible to do with this particular structure? Should you get to that and have that ability to take it over and refurbish it for use, maybe by a scout group or whatever the case may be?
If you thought when we discussed Ways Lane, if you thought that completely redoing Ways Lane was expensive, you ought to see the price of moving a building like that. I've seen hundreds of thousands of dollars spent to move a building literally 10 feet and to put it back down.
Sure.
So to move it off the property and situate it elsewhere, you're talking...
Old building with foundations that are not
And I thought
poured
that,
cement.
I thought that part of the Underground Railroad is the location.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I think that it would need to, to keep its historic value, I think it needs to remain where it is. And Mr. Silver has expressed that he doesn't want it gone from there. If somebody now wants to buy it, they could keep it there.
Thank you.
That's not to say that the option isn't on the table. It's just at this juncture, highly improbable.
There's another home, it's not in Kennett Township, but it's further down, that's Longwood Garden owns. That's
Right.
very close to the road, and I think there's some discussion about...
Across from where Dunkin' Donuts is?
Moving that back, as
Yes,
part of the Route 1 widening, which seems to widen fairly often. And possibly moving that back. And on our tour, we also saw one that did get moved back on a private property, so I think it is possible, but...
Yeah, it was moved back, like you said.
Years ago, Longwood tried to move it, and they were told it was of historic value. and
Yeah.
stayed there, so.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay.
I want to give you the status of the gun ordinance, for some of you who were not at the meeting. We held a meeting on April 7th just to talk about the gun ordinance, to get everyone's input, concerns, people for the ordinance, against the ordinance. The bottom line is, our attorney is looking into all the concerns that everyone had, and currently, it seems that we will be amending the ordinance.
Correct.
Once it is amended, it will be posted online for everybody to review, and we'll discuss it at the next public meeting after it's amended, and not to vote on, just discuss it and proceed from there. Joe?
Can we call it something other than the gun ordinance? That's a hot button.
Discharge firearm ordinance, sorry.
Firearms discharge ordinance,
There you go.
It's just, raises
Right,
hair on the back of people's necks.
yes.
And It's not really about that.
No, it's about discharge of firearms.
Thank you.
A firearms discharge. At 5:30 this evening, the supervisors and Dave and I had a meeting on Ways Lane. We met with all the property owners that showed up from Ways Lane. Recently, the supervisors agreed for the road crew to go in and put millings in all the potholes in Ways Lane, because at this point it's not passable for emergency services and for the mail carriers. So Roger, our roadmaster, is waiting for the potholes to dry out so that he can put asphalt millings in there to at least make the road passable. In the meantime, we requested a meeting with the residents to talk about the future of the road, because Ways Lane is a private lane. It's owned by everybody who lives on that lane. There's not a road easement that runs down through Ways Lane. So the outcome of the meeting was that we charged our engineer with coming up with different options for Ways Lane. An option to keep it private so that the residents know how much it would cost them if they want to oil and chip the road or pave the road, and also some options if it were to be built to a township standard road, just so everybody gets an idea of the costs. And then after we get that proposal back, we're going to have another meeting with the residents and let them know, what the options are, and try to get everybody together out there to fix the road and keep it a private road, more than likely. A couple years ago, all the residents did come together, and all but one agreed to pay their share to, I don't know what top coat they were going to put on there, but so they feel that it would be helpful if the township got everybody together to pay their fair share out there to try to fix the road. So that's how we're proceeding with Ways Lane.
A quick question?
Yes.
What was the attendance at this meeting on the part of the Ways Lane property owners? Was
There were
it-
about 8.
So 8 out of?
18.
Okay. And were they the larger holders of property, or?
One of them was. Well, 2 of them are. One property owner, he owns the majority of the property out there. And then another gentleman owns about 4 or 5 properties. But then there were still 10 other property owners that didn't show up. So the property owner that owns the majority of the property out there, he was in full agreement to pay his share to fix that road. Everybody should have received an invitation for the Chandler Mill Bridge meeting. They went out last week. The meeting is April 30th at the Red Clay Room. And the agenda's online, along with a feasibility study that was prepared by our engineering firm. So everyone's encouraged to attend. We had a meeting, Roger and I had a meeting with DEP to talk about our MS4 program, which is our stormwater program that we're required to follow. And our engineer was in attendance, so we feel that we have a pretty good path forward on what we need to do to comply with the MS4 program. We have to adopt an ordinance soon, which is an ordinance that was prepared by the state that we have to adopt for stormwater management requirements. We also have to go out and identify all the outfalls from stormwater, even if they're on private property. So we're.
Can you tell us what an outfall is, please?
Sorry. So from the road, Roger, correct me if I'm wrong. You have a drainage where the water goes in, and then it might go underground for a while and come out a pipe out in the middle of your yard, or it could be right off the road, but it's a pipe that discharges the water. Is that correct?
Opening of the pipe.
Correct.
Yes,
It's the very end.
the very end.
And some of them are buried and hidden and
On private
a
property.
surprise to everybody when they're finally discovered.
Right. So we have a good path forward with that.
One question, sorry. And so will there be easements that are created associated with this to allow the township personnel to travel onto these properties over time and do the testing that's called for in this ordinance? Is that the idea?
We haven't gotten that far with we just had this meeting last week. That was one of my questions for DEP, is how are we going to access these outfalls, because they're not on our property? And he felt that we could just go on and, talk to him, but that's on our list to talk to our attorney about how we're going to manage that, because we don't feel we can just walk on their property and inspect their outfalls.
I suspect many of them don't think you should either.
Exactly. So that's on our list to figure out the best way to handle it.
Sorry, I'm not sure of the protocol of these meetings yet, but may I ask where the supervisors stand as far as, either opening or keeping the bridge closed in Chandler Mill?
That is,
Come to the meeting on April
open
30th.
question.
That's a $2 million question, I guess.
That's if you go online,
Right.
or I can email it to you, whatever you want. We have a feasibility study from our engineer that lists 5 options for the bridge. So the supervisors haven't made a decision on what option they think that should be done. They want to get input from the public.
I'm just going to start driving all of this.
It's still a county bridge, and it's still, if we did nothing, would be a county responsibility to complete it based on what they're intending on doing. Will that be made clear at the meeting?
Oh, yes, and the counties...
Are you going to be there?
Absolutely.
Then you'll make it clear.
That will be made clear in our chairman's opening statement, but the county is also invited and will be attending. Not the county commissioners, but county representatives.
Good deal.
And if that's what happened,
Well, I just
and it
saw,
stayed with the county, at some point in the future, in your lifetime,
make it
it'll
done.
be a 2-lane superhighway.
Oh, yeah, well, that's debatable. But the thing is that the cost of the township is zero. If the county, I'm not saying it's cost-free to the residents because we pay county taxes, but I think it needs to be made clear to the residents that the out-of-pocket cost of the township is as low as zero with that option. Because all the other options are 1-point-something million, or closing it for like $500-some thousand and putting a cul-de-sac down there. And so I think...
That option will be
Yeah,
known.
okay.
I wanted to, this is the other thing that was mailed out recently, was our newsletter. Everybody should have received this.
No.
Have not seen that yet.
Or it's just being mailed out. Okay, sorry. I was thinking it went out last week. I got my copy.
What a surprise.
Well, you will be receiving it very soon. And I wanted to let you know that one of our communications committee members, Jeff Yetter, made a suggestion that we look at another printing company which saved us almost 50% on our printing of the newsletter. On top of that, I wanted to recognize Bill McLaughlin, because Bill McLaughlin laid out this entire newsletter. It's very nice. It's very well done, and he did an excellent job. And he's volunteer, so he did a great job.
She's got another way.
Yeah, so I not only wanted to thank Bill for the amazing job he did on it, but Jeff Yetter for pointing out this other company to us we weren't aware of, who's also a resident. So they are doing it's called Mailing Inc. So they're doing the newsletter now, and it's great. It was really good. So, just thought Bill should be recognized for that. And I also wanted to say on the website, I know people are still expressing frustration with the website, but we are working very hard to get the website to where it needs to be. And Bill is, I know how much time I put in on the website at night and on the weekends. Bill is doing it. He's assisting us, and he's a volunteer. And so it's getting to where it should be, but it's still taking some time. We're getting the ordinances put up hopefully within the next week, and the resolutions. So it is an amazing site. It looks great. It's just that I know that there's a lot of little things that aren't up there and fixed and running yet, but we're getting there.
So if people notice stuff, feel free to let you know.
Absolutely, because, Bill and I sit down for hours and go through page by page and link by link, and so we're trying to catch every little thing, but, sometimes we won't, so if you see something, let us know, because we might miss something. And I also wanted to say Sarah Meadows, one of our employees, she took the initial pictures that are on the website. We also have hired a township resident who's a photographer. She gave us a discount on her rate, and she's taken some professional pictures, which will be up hopefully in the next week, of various areas of the township. And if you notice not on the home page, but on all the other pages, the pictures sort of run together, so it looks like the township building's next to a mushroom house. They're going to be fixed, so they're in individual frames.
So it's not a rezoning.
Right.
Just like so. Take a picture of all the eyesores.
The Marshall Bridge repair was completed. Somebody, a drunk driver hit the Marshall Bridge and caused almost $10,000 of damage. So, yeah, their whole car went through the bridge. So we just got that repaired. We filed with our insurance company to get reimbursed. The other thing is, a couple months ago, the, I don't know what you call it, signal box at the intersection of McFarland and Old Baltimore Pike was hit and damaged, which cost us $26,000 to replace. It was a hit and run, so we have filed with our insurance for that.
Were you able to get the drunk driver?
Yes.
They're insured?
Yep. Yes, they were.
Lisa, isn't Marshall Bridge a county bridge?
No.
No, we're responsible
We're responsible for the abutment.
for the abutment, so that's what they hit, is the stone abutment. And that's where the damage was. I wanted to just state that we receive, every year the Brandywine Valley Scenic Byway Commission is required to give us a copy of their budget. It's not something we approve, they're just required to give it to us. We already approved our $500 contribution that we would give them. So I just wanted to announce that they have given us their budget. The supervisors have seen it. We don't have to make any motions on it.
How much was it?
Their budget, well, their total expenses are, for this year, is $11,775.
No, this is
But it
the
begins-
coming year.
Well, I was just going to say, it begins July to July. And their membership dues that they receive is a total of $2,500, and then the rest is made up of money they have. I wanted to announce that the yard debris pile that we have at the maintenance garage is huge at this point. We're trying to get the mulching company to come in and chip up the pile, but we're being pushed back because they're very busy. We're starting to have issues with people who are not residents dumping at the pile. We've caught a lot of people who are not residents dumping there. And a lot of them say, well, we live in East Marlboro, so we should be able to use it, or we live in New Garden, so we should be able to use it. So it's getting to the point that Roger and I joke that we need somebody to stand there and check their license because it's so bad. I mean, even, we're not sure what we're going to do about that or how to solve it. We don't have the gates locked now because people complained that then they couldn't get in there after hours. But the other problem with not having the gates locked, I know I get called almost every night from our alarm company, and Roger does too, that people are back in the yard debris pile at 11 o'clock at night, midnight. I don't think they're dumping mulch. I think they're just having fun.
You might be taking some, I don't know.
Right. So we have to figure out that. We're not sure what to do because when we closed the gates, people complained that we had the gates closed. Now that we have them open, we have this issue, so we're not sure what we're going to do about it yet. But yeah.
I thought at one time, the supervisors, or one of these meetings discussed putting solar locks on.
Yeah, and they never proceeded with that.
No.
It was expensive.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Are you going to turn that, I've seen the pile, are you going to turn it into mulch, or are you going to turn it into compost that
Mulch.
residents can, so what do you do with the mulch?
Right, we deliver it to residents who want it. If you call and ask, we'll deliver it.
We deliver wood chips.
Well, wood
that we
chips.
chip.
We consider
Mulch pile, when the weaver's mulch comes and grinds the pile for free for the material. So they take the material that they grind. We do have a little bit at the end that's, a lot of the soils are mixed in with it. We have a little
Right.
pile left over from last year still there, but that's given away to residents that wanted to, so.
And that's compost.
It's a little bit of everything ground in it. We're not separating grass and leaves and
You're not
sticks.
separating?
No.
Guaranteed to be weed-free?
Yeah, as long as you go out and pull them.
But if anybody wants it, we deliver it. John Hadrick called me today about the bikeway project and said that they're running into some issues with some change orders that are needed out there, such as trees that need to be removed and some other things to install the bike path. They will be submitting at some point some change orders for the project and are hopeful that the supervisors will approve some change orders, which could result in a cost up to $20,000 over time. I haven't seen, isn't that correct, Tom?
Yeah, the 20,000 would be for the entire project.
Right.
The initial estimate that we received today for the couple of trees was 3,200, and that will probably go to between 3,000 and 4,000 for the trees. But for the entire project, we estimate that's what it might be.
Yeah.
5 years.
Who would be responsible for that, or would that be a cost share between?
We're going to have to work that out.
Yeah, I'm just giving you guys a heads up that this has come up, but nothing formal has come before us for a request.
Yeah, as you know, we have the $100,000 also for landscaping. Most of this involves landscaping right now, not the actual contracting of the construction.
Okay, thank you.
I know.
I submitted a grant for, I know I've talked about this several times, but it was submitted for the sidewalk project. And that, if we were approved, sidewalks would be installed on McFarland Road, on Rosedale Road into the borough, on West Cypress, from the borough line to the New Garden line, the New Garden intersection of Scarlet and Cypress. New Garden is part of the project. And then there would be sidewalks installed from the Penn's Manor development into the borough. It's a $900,000 project. If we are approved, we would only have to pay 20% of the project cost.
Bike lanes included?
No.
Why not?
Well, because this was just for sidewalks. It wasn't for bike lanes.
Well, it would seem to me appropriate that when sidewalks are discussed, that bike lanes should be discussed at the same time. People getting around on bikes, Cypress, I see it all the time. I see walking, I also see bikers.
I agree that bikers need to be addressed, but in order for the supervisors to put in a bike path, it's a whole different process than putting in sidewalks, because they would need to have obtain more of the right-of-way, obtain more right-of-way. So that's something the supervisors can look at for the future.
I'm not happy with that answer, but, I stated my case. I mean, I think there should be one and the same. I don't think anything should be, I don't think sidewalks should be approved without having bike lanes discussed at the same point and voted on. And, determined on cost. The whole thing should be wrapped up together, not separate.
Well,
We're in the process of forming a sidewalk and trails committee. And it would be really helpful to have your perspective on that committee.
Yeah, well, it's the second time that, I've mentioned bike lanes when it comes to sidewalks.
Well, my point, what I'm trying to say is that the grant I was applying for was for sidewalks and trails, not for a bike path. So it couldn't be included in the project I was applying for, but that's not to say that it can't be done in the future for another grant or, something else that the supervisors are looking at.
On the planning commission, when we were looking at this, and because it's two different townships are sharing the costs, I can guarantee you it would not have happened if they were any more expensive, because New Garden was very hard to convince that even the sidewalks were something we should do. And now I'm going to say it's kind of it's a pedestrian safety issue that we identified for people that were leaving the borough trying to get to the shopping center in New Garden, the Giant and all the stores there. So I really understand what you're saying, because I'd rather have the bikes off the road than always in our way.
Or on the sidewalk.
Well, I think
Well, I've seen it too. I mean, if the bike is up against the car, the bike's going to go on the sidewalk. It just, it's this constant, I know there's cost, and I know there's a conflict between cars and bicycles, but bicycles are becoming more and more essential, and I see it.
But this grant didn't include them, so let's try and get this and then go on.
My suggestion that you be on the committee was a very serious one. I appreciate your point of view, and would like to have it heard more effectively.
at least there's 2 lanes there, so you can each coexist on the road, compared to some of our winding township roads.
My last thing is I just wanted to give an update on the capital projects we're working on, that our engineer's working on. So, the Ashford wastewater meter replacement project, that's to replace meters that at the Ashford treatment plant system. We have the project out for bid because it's like an $18,000 project, or maybe more, 20. And so the bids are due by May 1st. We're doing a physical needs assessment of the township building, public works garage, and pole barn, and that report should be done by the end of the month. We're doing a pavement management system on all the roads to determine what we should be doing to repair the roads, what products we should be using, get the roads on a schedule of maintenance and repair, and that should be done next month. I talked about Chandler Mill Bridge. That feasibility study was already done and it's on the website. We're working with our engineer on our MS4 and stormwater updates. And we are 75% complete on our future needs for our sanitary sewer. Our engineer is examining what all our future needs are for sewer. Our engineer did a pedestrian crossing study for a crossing that the Land Conservancy wanted to do for a trail continuation at the intersection of Hillendale and Chandler Mill Road, and that study has been completed. We will be beginning to start the project for the Marshall Bridge Road Creek stabilization. That project sort of was put on hold, and we're getting ready to put it out for bid, hopefully by the summer. And that's all I have finally.
Okay.
So next is our Chief of Police summary.
This is for the month of March. There were 159 requests for police services received through the Chester County Police Radio Communications System and from calls directly to the Township office. This does not include the calls received by the state police. I did not have that number when I prepared this, but it was 53. which brings us to 212. Interesting enough, there were 213 last month. The secretarial position that was added is catching up. We're developing a number of systems for traffic citations, non-traffic citations, and criminal arrest. You remember that I was the Lone Ranger. I had my own filing system, which doesn't work for everybody. Snow and ice this year has really plagued the township police. The last snow we had was March 17th. However, there were a number of dustings or ice coatings which create a slick roadway. That creates a problem for both the township police and the township road crew. But the road crew, as always, has done very well with handling those. Under the special training, both officers attended a special training developed by the Chester County District Attorney's Office and the Chester County Police Chiefs Association that deals with recent events occurring in today's society. I'm not going to mention what that is, but I can say we're prepared. The other training we attended was a special training we were invited to concerning DUI procedures and court cases involving DUIs. Interesting enough, we learned that there is a new classification called DUI-D, which is DUI drugs. And you would think that that means illegal drugs, but it doesn't. It means drivers under the influence of prescription drugs, and caught us some procedures on how to deal with that. The township has a DUI problem. You might note some early morning hours. You see the damage, particularly Thursday through Sunday mornings. An example is the Route 82 bridge and Marshall's Bridge that Lisa mentioned. That was $10,000 damage. The traffic signal at Baltimore Pike and McFarland Road. And if you just look around the township, you see signs that are knocked down, trees, yards that are invaded. So we know we have a late night DUI problem in the latter part of the week. We are also putting together another DUI checkpoint on Route 1, and we did that twice last year, which were quite successful. The first one was 11 DUI arrests on one checkpoint, which is high. That's on Route 1 and Route 52. On March 26th, the Comunidad, the Spanish Center, invited all the Southern Chester County Police chiefs and the commander of the State Police Barracks at Avondale to a lunch meeting to discuss law enforcement and the Spanish Center and how we could aid each other. Everyone agreed it was quite productive and agreed to schedule more in the future. On March 26th, there was an impromptu meeting held at the Church of the Advent on North Union Street by the Kennett Area Action Committee. I attended that, and it was discussed emergency homeless shelter for families in southern Chester County. You may recall in the press in the past several months there were at least 3 families who went homeless. Other times there are families who are homeless as a result of a physical domestic situation. The Red Cross will house these for up to 3 days, but with no shelter here, sometimes the families must be transported great distances. Sometimes they're put up in a hotel. So that was a successful meeting. There were 16 people in attendance. They had another recently, and I don't know what the outcome will be of that. I don't know how the township police will figure into that. Maybe they shouldn't figure it at all, but the township manager and myself thought we should stay on top of this. I mentioned the work of Barrett and Hillendale Road, which the road crew will be doing to improve sight distance at the intersection. But based on last year's paving at that location, the police are probably going to provide some traffic control there to protect their road crew. And finally, two things. One is there have been a lot of recent concerns by the township residents because the activity on the road has increased dramatically in the past year. So we've been invited to a training class this month on how to address incidents involving the railroad and what we as police should be concerned about with some of the cars that they're now transporting. And we asked the residents, in some cases have been offended because I have been checking driver's licenses at the mulch pile. If I go in there or go past for some reason, I pull in and ask for a driver's license. And as the manager expressed, quite a few of them are not township residents. So I don't want the township residents to be offended by that activity, but I think it's important.
I have a question about the DUID. May I address the chief?
Sure.
Are you authorized to administer, I guess it's naloxone? Are you authorized to
We don't
administer
administer-
naloxone? So if someone is under the influence of an opioid, heroin, and is unconscious, they're in the car, what do you do?
We call EMS, Emergency Medical Services.
Okay, well, some police, from what I understand, can administer, it's a spray, and it can immediately save a person's life, immediately.
Well, there are other tactics we use to save people's lives based on our training.
No, well, this is, you're talking about DUID, so you're talking about, this particular situation where someone, is OD'd.
Now, that is administered by police, but it's administered by a special unit that is, there are none in Chester County. We were advised about that the York County DUI does that, but it's almost like the ambulance have basic ambulance life support systems and they have advanced life support systems. And I don't know if our district attorney is going to entertain that or not. Right now, we perform services to save people's lives the same as we would anybody else.
Well, Pennsylvania is looking into that as far as giving, allowing Good Samaritans to carry this stuff. And I was wondering if our police department does.
I think that's a relatively new development that the FDA approved, the nasal spray, which is an anti-opioid agent to reverse if people have opioid abuse. It's especially useful for heroin overdose. It's just out. I think it's going to be evolving. We'll have to, Chief is aware of it, but I think we'll have to find out how it gets rolled out across the country, but especially here in Kennett. It's relatively new, newly approved, so we've got to have the right training, the right ways to recognize that it's opioid and a number of other things to make sure that it gets used properly.
There's a lot of attractiveness to that problem on public radio right now. It's been on several mornings, and this exact thing has happened with this nasal spray. And I think there's also an injection that can be done if you don't have the nasal spray.
Right, that's been out longer.
Yeah. And they are indicating that almost anybody can use it, like a family member, they suspect that he's on it, and all of a sudden they carry him with an overdose, they can use the spray on him, a family member.
Yeah, I mean, those are more available than our lawyer because they've changed the laws also in terms of if you see someone with a drug overdose, specifically opioid overdose, there's other things that have changed too. So,
problem is, how do you know it's an opiate overdose?
Yeah, so it's a complicated situation, but I think thanks for pointing out, I think it's something that we'll get apprised on it as it rolls out in the future.
I think it would be the district attorney that makes that call.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, it does raise also questions about heroin use in the, in the township, and citing the talk we've heard on public radio and the DA in Bucks County. It's in middle schools. It's around, and I'm wondering if if the community has a reason to address it. It's schools, parents, community. I'm wondering if there's some kind of a discussion that can, in the future, can involve the community, meaning the township. It's a growing problem. We know that.
Thank you for that input.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Next, I wanted to announce that the supervisors had an executive session on March 24th at 6 p.m. to discuss personnel matters in regards to the police contract. I'm required to announce their executive sessions. Next, do we have a motion to pay the bills?
Okay, there is no business, so we're now under new business. Do I have a motion? So moved. All in favor? Aye. It's approved unanimously.
Next, I've been helping the Kennett Area Regional Park apply for a grant so that they can get new bleachers and playground equipment and do some upgrades at the Herb Pennock.
Recreation, it's not the park, is it?
Park and Recreation, yes. So that they can get some upgrades done to the Herb Pennock field. So we have a resolution before the supervisors tonight, which is needed to apply for the grant. And so I ask that the supervisors consider adopting this resolution 2014-7.
We have a motion to that effect? So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
How much is the grant for?
None opposed.
May I ask?
Getting there.
What the organization, what the agencies that you're applying to for this grant?
We are applying to DCNR, which is Department of Community Natural Resources.
You know, which part of their funding, because the Kennett Area Park Authority, as you know, has also applied for a DCNR grant.
This grant is for greening and making safe play areas.
Okay, thank you.
And it was due today. The resolution wasn't required to be submitted with the grant, it just has to be submitted at some point. The total project is about $180,000. Of which, if they receive the grant, the township contributes about $20,000 to the Park and Rec Board every year. So our contribution would go towards this for the next 3 years. They have 3 years to complete the project.
Okay. You were saying that there are executive decisions made. Is that behind closed doors, or are they made in a meeting?
No, there's...
No, it's an executive session was held, not executive decisions. An executive session is permitted under the Sunshine Act, where there are certain categories of issues that can be discussed by a quorum of the Board of Supervisors in private. And the law says that after that happens, they must come out and announce what the topic of it was and specifically what it referred to without giving details of it. But that's permitted by law. No decisions can be made except in public session by a vote in public of a majority of the Board of Supervisors. This is just for discussion of agency business that the law has deemed to be better discussed in private, not in public.
Okay.
One of which, as in this case, are collective bargaining agreements. Because if they negotiate in public, then it's not really a negotiation. It's strategy is given away, and that's why the law recognizes that as an executive session topic, and that's what the board discussed.
I know Mr. Leff was in favor of transparency, so that's what and I really liked that point that he had there.
Right.
And I heard executive decisions and
no decisions. The law says no decision can be made in private. Only discussion of agency business and decisions are made in meetings like this.
Good.
And there's only certain things they can discuss in private. One of them is personnel matters, or, for example, like you said, a police contract, which will be discussed here in the
Acquisition of real property, pending or threatened litigation. Those are items that are typically discussed in executive session, and then decisions are made in public.
The next thing I have is the Vision Partnership Program Grant. Right now, the Planning Commission is working with the Chester County Planning Commission to update our comprehensive plan, and it's under a Vision Partnership Grant. So this grant started in March 2012, and it expires every 6 months. So we need to, it doesn't expire every 6 months. We need to extend it for 6 months to allow the completion of the comp plan review. So that's what the grant renewal is for. To date, the county, all the work the county has done for our comp plan has cost us $1,400. It's a 80-20 grant, so we're paying 20% of the cost.
Yeah.
So with that, I asked that the supervisors
We've gotten our
vote.
money's worth.
Yeah. They meet with the extension. They meet with the planning commission every week, or every month, to
All in favor?
update the comp plan.
There's a ton of work that's gone into the comprehensive plan. There's how many sections of the comprehensive plan?
We're into our second, well into our second year.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so.
That's at least 20, I'd say at least 20 sessions.
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Not opposed? Okay.
The next is Ordinance 216, which amends our street tree list. Our street tree list that we had in place was out of date, and a lot of the street trees that were permitted to be installed by developers are no longer permitted, or no longer exist, or they're not something that should be planted in the area. So Ordinance 216 is to amend the street tree list. Attached to the ordinance is 4 pages of the approved street tree planting list for the township.
Do you have a motion to accept it?
So moved.
Second. All in favor? Very good, thank you.
Does anybody have any questions on that street tree list?
Does it mean that you can't plant a tree at the edge of your property if it's on a street?
No.
Unless you're on this list?
It's for developments.
Oh, okay.
It's for new developments that go in, so when there's new streets being put in, it's trees and plants that are approved for development plans. Now, once you move into that development and you want to plant more plants, you're welcome to do that, but these are the recommended and approved plants for developments.
So we would hope you would use one.
Right.
You don't have
But you don't have
Did our landscape person have any input on that?
Yes, he did.
Okay.
He reviewed it and made changes, and someone, Margaret Taylor from our LCAC, she also gave input, and the Environmental Advisory Committee reviewed it as well and made recommendations. The next thing on the agenda is a regional police study letter of intent. The township was approached by New Garden Township, and they also approached the borough of Kennett Square to see if there was an interest in doing a regional police study. The regional police study is free. We don't get charged anything for doing the study. The supervisors would like to talk to New Garden and the borough, and in order for the study to begin, we would have to sign a letter of intent and send it to DCED, which is the Department of Community and Economic Development, and they are the ones who would do the study. The study takes about 4 to 6 months to complete. Once the study is complete, it would show us what each municipality would have to pay for their portion of a regional police service. Regional police service would provide 24-hour coverage to the township. So tonight, the supervisors are going to consider signing the letter of intent if they want to proceed with a regional police study. And the other municipalities, New Garden and the borough, are doing the same at their public meetings.
What do you mean by a regional now?
What would if once a regional police study is done, then the townships, municipalities would look at the study to determine if they wanted to enter into a regional police group. If that occurred, the 3 municipalities within that study would create a regional police department, which means that there would be one police department centralized for Kennett Township, New Garden Township, and Kennett Borough. And that police department would service all 3 townships. And there would be one member from each board of each municipality that would serve on that regional police commission. And, there,
So there would only be 3 municipalities.
in this study, there are only 3 that are looking at it right now.
Right, you can add more, you can take
I
away.
mean, you would think since Kennett and East Marlboro sort of commingle up here, that you'd get them in there so that you had one big, so
Well,
I'm like, so this isn't above what we already have, it's combining everybody together.
Correct.
And it would take several years to, if we got it, and it did take several years to
Right.
get started.
But the study, since the study is free, the study would show the residents and the supervisors how much it would cost for the township to provide 24-hour service. So once the study comes back, everybody needs to examine what the cost would be and decide if they want to proceed with that or not.
Who initiated this free service, this idea?
Well, it's not free.
The
assessment's free.
Who's doing the assessment, is that what you're asking?
Who initiated? Usually when you see something free, I'm in purchasing.
Well, no.
There's usually some.
The study,
It's a state agency
Yeah.
that provides this service.
New Garden Township approached Kennett Township.
And they had done
Has anybody checked with the county? They've been fooling around with that for years and years since I was in it. And there was a proposal, several proposals put together for regionalization, including southern Chester County.
Yes, there was one done, I think it was 3 years ago.
Right. And they made no progress?
That was done, I believe, with 5 municipalities.
Not including Kennett.
And not including Kennett. Kennett at the time didn't participate in it. But nothing ever came about with that study.
Okay.
Building on this gentleman's question, how were the municipalities chosen, and for specifically, why was East Marlboro not mentioned as being asked to join the party? Being that we have so much overlapping on Baltimore Pike, I'm thinking specifically.
I am not the one who, we are not the ones who did that. We did ask the question why the other municipalities, East Marlboro and Copson, why they weren't included, and we were told that it's been discussed before and they didn't have the interest.
Okay.
Now, I don't know that for certain because I haven't talked to them about it.
Do we have a motion to sign this letter and request that the study be done and include Kennett Township?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Not opposed. Thank you.
The next thing I have on here is the Land Conservancy Advisory Committee budget. And as you saw earlier, Tom Kennett gave a presentation for doing some mapping and, his whole scope of work for creating the overlay district. So the Land Conservancy Advisory Committee does not have a budget currently. So they're asking for the supervisors, now that the supervisors approved Tom Kennett's proposal and the Brandywine Conservancy proposal, then I'm asking if the supervisors will approve a budget overage for the Land Conservancy Advisory Committee of $20,000 because they didn't have a budget to begin with. It's just a formality process since they approved the project.
Well, and they sort of got reconstituted
Right.
this year, so.
Right.
Understandable. So they've requested a budget of $20,000?
Yes.
Okay.
What's okay mean? Are you making the motion?
No, okay, make sure I understood what the request was, so I'll so move.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Not opposed.
The next thing, as you heard, we discussed the police chief's contract. His contract had already expired. We've been working on it and working on the job description. Both of these are on the website. The employment contract for the police chief would begin today, if enacted and approved. It spells out in the contract that he gets paid $91,000 for the year. It outlines his terms of employment, his duties of employment, and his employee benefits and bonuses and termination of employment. And the contract is effective for 1 year. Attached to the contract is the police chief's job description and his job description, duties, and responsibilities. So at this point, we're asking that the supervisors consider renewing his contract for another year.
Is there a motion?
I have a question on
Second, I
that.
have a question.
Can we get the motion on the floor first, and then we'll discuss?
Yes, sir.
Moved,
Second.
seconded. Thank you. Yes, sir.
As a contract, is it a contract with Mr. McCarthy?
Yes, it is.
And is it excluded from the bid policy?
And what was the-
Bid policy?
The bid policy, yes.
Yes,
And is that for professional services, is that correct?
that's for professional services, correct.
Was there a question back here?
Yeah, I was wondering how overtime is handled.
He is not entitled to overtime. The way it works right now is if Chief McCarthy has to work overtime, then he does, and he does not get paid for it. If there's a situation where we know something's coming up that would cause him to work overtime, we will change the shift around.
Is that, our second patrol officer, that's a separate contract?
Yeah, we're working on that next,
Okay.
and a job description for him as well. Well, we already have the job description done, we're working on the contract next.
Thank you.
Mr. Goff?
Yes, question. Under the contract, chief will be paid $91,000 for the duration of this one-year contract. What was the chief's compensation during his last contract, and how long was that effective for?
I'm going to give you a number off the top of my head, but I believe it was like 87,000.
I was going to say 86.
Or it might have been 86.5. And that contract was for a year.
So it's really just creating a new contract?
Correct.
Thank you.
So how many hours does it involve a week?
The way we have it outlined is the police chief and our patrol officer work 80 hours every 2 weeks. They have a schedule that is created 3 months in advance, and they alternate shifts, and then they usually work 10-hour shifts. So then, like I said, if something comes up that they find out, they talk to me and we amend their schedule accordingly. For example, our patrol officer had 3 days of training last week that came up, and he was already scheduled to work, so we changed that around accordingly.
Any other questions? Any discussion from the supervisors? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
None opposed. Congratulations, Chief. You're legal.
Can I just clarify that's a benefits contract, not an employment contract? I have to be removed if I... Thank you.
Albert, would you come up here and sign this? And then you can sign this.
What do you say you had to be removed by coach?
Yeah.
My hand rise to sign.
The next, I'm going to read the road report, unless Roger wants to read it.
Good job.
Pretty cut dry.
As he said, the Marshall Bridge was repaired at a cost of about $10,000. Potholes are being fixed as soon as they appear throughout the township. I must say, our township does not have potholes like other places do. We're pretty good. We have a few.
That's true.
State roads.
You got a couple rough ones.
All right, we got a couple rough ones. Tell Roger, he'll fix it.
Even state roads?
No, we won't fix the state road.
We can enter a contract with the state.
Right. We could.
Okay.
Can I make a comment that I broke in anyway? Across from Phillips Construction going on right now, there's a nasty set of potholes on the opposite of it. And I think it's a traffic hazard because people are coming close to the line and forcing people into those potholes.
We've reported it to PennDOT.
Okay.
Do you know where he's talking about, across from Phillips Mushroom, where they're doing that widening?
I'll call tomorrow.
On the right, because traffic coming southbound is pushed more towards the median, it's pushing people on the right lane going north.
I'll give him a call tomorrow.
You guys don't get the sign yet. Trees are being chipped up around the township from storm damage. I already talked about the yard waste pile. The snow plow and cinder spreaders are put away for the summer and salt piles are covered for storage. The annual spring cleanup was held on March 29th in coordination with the Red Clay Valley Association.
You're optimistic about the weather.
That's right.
I'm sorry,
No
keep
more
going.
snow.
Snow's closed.
That's right.
It'll be freezing right now, but go ahead.
We had snow yesterday.
Yes. Roger said that if it snowed, he's done with snow, he's just driving road.
Day off.
That's what he said. That's what he said.
Drive careful.
So there was a good turnout for the spring cleanup. That was on March 29th. They had lots of volunteers, including supervisors. So we want to say a huge thank you for everybody that participated. Heavy winter cindering has left lots of cinders in our subdivision. We started sweeping subdivisions on Monday, and the contractor will pick up the piles of stone. Prior to the sweeping, the road crew went out cleaning up yards, pushing the stone into the cul-de-sacs. We're also working on repairing the yards that were damaged from snow plows throughout the winter, and we're still fixing mailboxes.
For those who ride motorcycles, be careful of the cinders and gravel, please.
The township made up mulch this year from the recycling lot products. A lot of the mulch was recently dumped on the lily flower beds at McFarland and Old Baltimore Pike Triangle for the Environmental Advisory Committee to spread around.
Engineer has recommended release of escrow release number 2 for Richardson's Run, the amount of $38,400. I move we approve that release.
How much is left?
It'll be $1,013,000 roughly.
Okay, I'll second, sorry, I should have seconded first.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, no.
We have 2 requests for subdivisions, Mr. Chairman. Ham property until October 28th, and Speakman Lord Howe property until July 6th this year. I move we approve both extensions.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I have something to bring up on Richardson's Run while you're talking about the escrow release.
We already voted on it.
I know you did. I'm not going to ask you to change your vote. Roger and I had a meeting with the developer on Friday, and right now they're working on phase 1 of the project. And we met with them to make sure everybody's on board of what is expected and what they need to do to start the project and get their model home in there. While we were in the meeting, the developer asked if he could delay putting up his letter of credit for phase 2 just so he could grade the area, not put in a road or construct any houses. And so I told him I would ask the supervisors if you are willing to do that or not. So right now he has phase 1, he has a letter of credit. Your agreement with him is that all the fees that he is required to pay, he would pay with the first building permit. It's about $300,000. He put his first building permit in now for the model home. So he knows that when he picks up the building permit package, when it's approved, he has to pay his fees. While the weather is nice, he wants to be able to grade the area for phase 2. But he doesn't want to have to put up the letter of credit for Phase 2 until he begins the infrastructure and putting in a road and everything else. Right now, he's going to pave Phase 1, which he's required to do. So he wants to know if you'd be willing to allow him to grade Phase 2 without putting up a letter of credit.
Well, we don't have any fish clear, do we, really?
No, you don't. It's a more common than you think, request to allow grading, but no actual, improvements. Grading is not set forth on the construction cost estimate, it says an improvement, so it's not, there's no risk there.
I'll move we approve.
You don't have to make a motion, I just need to know.
All right.
I'd withdraw my second.
Okay.
I was concerned, actually, when I'm going along with it, but I do want to say that I was concerned when 3 or 4 months ago, whatever it was, we agreed to postpone the putting up of the money until the actual work was being done, which moved everything down several months. And so I'm not looking to see that pattern being continued into the future.
Well, for Phase 2, it's the same process. He has to put up the letter of credit, and at that time that he puts up the letter of credit, he has to pay the fees for Phase 2. It's not, he has to, when he gets a permit for Phase 2.
Right, okay. I mean, that's what we already agreed to.
Right.
So I'm not changing that, but I'm
No.
saying that's a bad precedent to set.
It is. So, can we adjourn?
Please?
Public comment.
Public comment, please. And is there any other input?
Bob, was that a motion to adjourn?
So what?
Oh, yeah, I was kidding.
Okay. Thank you all for your patience.